Hello and welcome to another video for JTS from Napoleonic PC Wargamers. Today we're going to look at how to set up a play-by email game and have a look at the benefits of playing another human opponent. I'm going to use campaign Austerlitz for this one. And the first thing we do, we get this file selection box. Now to play against another human opponent, I cannot emphasize how great this game is against other human opponents. The AI has its limitations, gives you a bit of a challenge, gives you something to shoot at, but these games are absolutely fantastic when you actually find another human player to play against. I really feel that's how they actually should be played. To get your file selection dialog box, and the first thing we're going to do is make sure we've got play by email selected. We're then going to choose a scenario, just any one, Caldera will do, and we're going to press OK. Next, new scenario dialog box, we're going to choose who we want to be. Let's say I want to be the French. I'm going to make sure fog of war is on to make it as realistic as possible. I wouldn't mess around personally with the advantage slider, just because we like it to be in the middle rather than giving one side an advantage. We're going to change our rules. Now, it may not always be the rules you play with ordinarily against the computer, against the AI. You'd have to agree these rules in advance with your opponent. Some players might like to play with certain rules, some might not like certain rules, but both parties should agree at the start. Go OK, and then we're going to start. So I'm going to play against myself and email myself this turn. So we start off as the French, and it's my turn first. If it was your opponent's turn first, as soon as you get onto the main screen, the file will be ready to email across to your opponent, and they do their turn, and then you can do yours. So I'm going to go ahead and just move some units up here, things like that. So essentially, I've done my turn. Now, there are a couple of settings I want to talk about that we can include in our games. If we come up here and come to settings, we've got this PBEM or play by email encryption, and that means that we can add a password to our turn, if you like. It can be anything you want, and it basically means that your opponent won't be able to replay and have a look at your turn, or even play your turn, without having to put your password in. Now, generally, once you find a trustworthy player and a player you've played against for a while, you wouldn't really need to do that because you trust them that they're not going to go in and mess around with your turn or have a look at your turn and view your troops and things like that. Maybe on a new player, if it's somebody I played for the first time or I didn't know, I would encrypt it. But generally, I don't feel the need for PBM encryption. Another option is this no file save. This means that when you do your turn, particularly in larger battles where you've got a lot of troops to move around and stuff like that, during the course of our turn, we can't come up here and press save. That's because, in this case down here with these Austrians that I found, for example, if that was disadvantageous to me, I could go back to my previous save and I could avoid actually getting into that conflict and go up and around them because I know those troops are there. Shorter battles, and if you don't necessarily, let's say, trust your opponent as much, maybe you would want to do that. But certainly on the big battles with a lot of troops and stuff, that's very unkind. We can't all sit down at a computer for hours on end and then have to not save that turn or just leave it running with the risk of the computer turning off or something like that. So that was that play by email encryption. Gives you a password to play during your turn, and then the no save file does not allow your opponent or yourself to actually save during the course of your turn. You've got to do your turn in one full go. So I move my troops around. That means I've basically completed my turn. So now I can go to the next turn button, and we can save the battle. I'm going to call it or give it a name that is recognisable, because if you've got a few games going on, you don't want to get them all mixed up. So I'm going to say Russ versus Russ in this case. I'm going to save that file, and then we get end of play by email local control. Your file is now ready to send to your opponent. So I'm going to go ahead and email my opponent. Go ahead and email my opponent. Now you put their address in and the subject and what have you. And the email that we want, we have to find our install file for the game that we're playing. So we're playing Austerlitz. and we want, for a battle, a standalone battle, a .bte file. If it was a campaign file, it would be a .cpf file. So that's Ross versus Ross. That's the attachment we want to send, and I would then send it. So now my opponent has emailed me back my file. I've downloaded the BTE file that should be attached to his file, and I'm ready to now load up my turn. So I'm going to open the install directory for Oscillate, or whichever game you're playing, open the file direction, and drag that file across into the install folder. It's saying we've already got one, okay, so we're going to replace that file, and then we're going to open up Oscillates again. I'm going to find an old game, same as you would have any saved game. Go to play by email. We can see here that we've got the one that we're playing. Load that up. And it gives us the option to re-watch the Allies battle replay. Now, if we've got Fog of War enabled, we can't watch every single move that they've made during that turn, only what we could actually physically see with Fog of War enabled. So let's have a look at what my opponent did. Okay, so you moved those skirmishes there. That's the end of the battle replay. Now it's our turn, it's our phase turn, and we can actually do it. So we can move our troops around again, and so on and so on. Now it might get to this stage where you think there's no point actually carrying on with the battle, and you want to call it a day. What we can do is come up here and say, place, play by email, or AI termination bid. We do that, and it will go on the level, initially, of how you're doing in that battle. So in this case, it's a draw. Only a few soldiers have died. It might be a case as a minor defeat, minor victory, or something like that. However, you can say, well, I think this should be considered as a French major defeat or a French minor victory, or whatever the case may be. You don't have to play the battle out right into the end. You can shake hands, say, well played, sir, and carry on with the day. That's an option, and we can place that, and then when my opponent gets his next turn in email and loads it up, it will come up on the screen that termination bid, or your opponent has placed a termination bid, and you can accept it, or you can say, well, no, that shouldn't be a major victory, I think it should be a minor victory or a draw, etc, etc. So that's the basis of how to set up and play a play by email game. I strongly suggest that you give it a go, because it just changes John Tiller beyond all recognition as to what you're playing against the AI. As you get further and a bit more serious, you might consider things like house rules. It's quite common for the more serious players to use things like house rules that try to eliminate some of the, for want of a better word, more gamey elements of the game itself. Again, they should be agreed in advance, and it doesn't mean that you have to play with these rules, but it makes the game a little bit more realistic. Another option, if you go on further and start to play it more and more, I would strongly suggest joining one of the few clubs that are around, such as the Napoleonic Wargaming Club. It's a very good one, I'm a member of that one, or the Wargaming Society, which has Napoleonics, and it also has American Civil War, amongst some other eras as well. That adds a little bit of flavour to what you're actually doing, rather than just playing for the sake of playing. You can get rank systems, they've got competitions, they've got tournaments and things like that. You can join an army, align yourself to an army, and it just adds a little bit more flavour to what you're doing, rather than just playing out battle for the sake of playing out battle. And you have some fun, you meet some nice people along the way, and it's a good chance to find some more opponents as well. Another thing I would suggest is to perhaps play out, if you've got the time, a campaign game rather than just a standalone battle. You can play campaign games against other players as well. And it adds a really nice element, because you've got to look after your troops rather than having them as sort of disposable in a standalone one-off battle where it doesn't matter if you lose 100,000 men. But if you're playing a campaign game, then those 100,000 men, you might have needed them in the next battle. Well, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've learned something about how to play this game by email. As always, please do leave some comments, good or bad, in the comment section, and happy gaming.